Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone to this Words Fest panel, Becoming a Writer, a conversation for aspiring writers. And we've got a really wonderful panel lined up for you tonight. We have five either current or recently graduated Western students who are active, working, publishing creative writers. And what they're going to do tonight is read a little bit from their work, and then you're going to have a chance to ask them questions about their own writing, their careers, advice they might have about writing, pursuing publishing, etc. I need to do a few things before we get started. First, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. I'm currently coming to you from my office in the University of Western Ontario, and that's located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, and the New Neutral peoples, on lands connected to several treaties, including Treaty 6, London Township, Treaty 7, Sombra Township, Treaty 21, Longwoods, and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, Wampum. This place continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples who are recognized as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to society. And we should continue to think about and grapple, those of us who are settlers in this place should continue to think about and grapple and work towards reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples that we share this land with. I'd also like to thank the Writing Studies program at Western for very graciously sponsoring this panel. A number of the students on this panel are from Writing Studies. They have given their sponsorship to it, supported these students, and allowed this panel to happen. So thank you very much to Writing Studies at Western. So this is how this is going to work. We have five writers. Each one in turn will read. We'll first have Andrew French, then Akshi Chadha, then Ashley Lee, and then Matthew, and then Courtney. I'm going to briefly introduce a writer reading their bio. They'll read for you, move on to the next writer. Once we've gone through everyone, we're then going to have a question and answer period where you have the opportunity to ask them whatever questions you might want to. If you want to ask a question, and I'll remind everyone of this before we start the Q&A, just drop it in either the Q&A or the chat. Our preference is for the Q&A, but if you put it in either of those places, we'll see it and make sure that we ask the panelists. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the first writer to read tonight. Andrew French is an author from North Vancouver, British Columbia. He's published 2 chapbooks, Do Not Discard Ashes and Poems for Different Use. Andrew has a BA in English from Huron University College at Western University and an MA in English from UBC. He currently lives in Burnaby, BC, where he writes poems, book reviews, and hosts Page Fright, a literary podcast, which is really quite a wonderful podcast. So it is my very great pleasure to welcome Andrew French.
Thank you, Aaron. It's so cool to be here. I am so excited to be reading some poems for you today. Just before I begin to tack on to Aaron's land acknowledgement, I wanted to mention that I'm coming to you from Burnaby, BC, so the other side of Canada, and I saw quite a few people from across the country putting their locations in the chat. But I'm coming to you from the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. I grew up here, so I have much that I owe to the land that I live on currently, in addition to the land that I was on in London for a few years there. I also wanted to thank Aaron and Josh for having me, and all of Words Fest as well. It means a lot to be able to be here. Today I'm going to read a few poems for you. I'll be pretty quick. The first one, I thought we would start back east because this is a London literary festival. So this is a poem from when I was living in Toronto between my first 2 years of university. It's called Reaching an End. This city is against you. The TTC worker said so when you dropped a dime in their box instead of a fare token, booked it to the platform. You braid subway strands, watch the stations knot, ends fray quietly into suburbs. Toronto scares you, but you're on a break from life here. Vancouver for London, London to Hamilton, Greyhound to Toronto. Take a job in automotive before you can legally drive. 4 months in collared shirts is enough. Being away from home for a full calendar year is enough. Reaching an end safely means breaking. Calling this a break means there's an end. The next poem I'm going to read is called Runner's High. You've scribbled in a notebook of fast food wrappers with fumbled Chipotle ink. Only love yourself in an oversized sweater torn from the rack of an Ontario thrift store. Today, try to run. Kindling shins become bonfire. Tell friends you're sprinting towards a goal, knowing full well you're jogging from yourself. Look at photos from college bars. Want the body back. To be small enough to feel a Mickey. To let your joints move without burning and hold you. The next one is a really short poem. It's out of a collection I'm working on now, all about my journey with trauma, PTSD, all of those fun things. And so the collection is called Sifting. This is the title poem from the collection. To relive your trauma is to sift through dirt from a garden that has long been dry. Filter pebbles of self in a small pile. Look, wonder, what the fuck do I do with this now? Next poem is called Merit 2020, which if you've ever been in BC and like worked your way between Vancouver and the interior, you've probably been through Merit. It's a super small town, country music capital of Canada. They're very proud of that. But I grew up camping there, and I went back last year with my family to the same campground that we went to growing up, and it was a completely different experience. So this poem is about that. It's called Merit 2020. Canada knows this city as country music capital. Single block downtown with the handprints of twang voice celebrities baked into the sidewalk. Smiling stars you can't name peer out from beneath the skies of identical 10-gallon hats on murals surrounding the town laundromat, where your Pac-Man high score probably still stands. They'll tell you the city is growing, but you can tell it's shrunk. Under 15 winters of snowfall, summers that have burned the forests to dust. You caught your first trout on this lake, your last, dozens in between. Looked away when Dad clubbed the fish, its blood pooling in the canoe he built in high school shop class. Spent a book of matches learning fire, roasting sweet marshmallows and lake catches. Slept in a trailer that braved the Coquihalla, its stiff joints squeaking when you roll over in the night. Your family gathers around the same fire pit now, plays the same games with a different feel. Try to figure out what's missing while you drive home, along highways carved into mountains, like initials in a heart on the campground outhouse. This is the last poem I'm gonna read. It's about my dad and his father, who passed away before I was born. It's called Sea to Sky. Dad loses his dad long before he becomes one. Do you remember the 21st night of September? 25 of them ago, Dad's dad was mowing a line through the trees while the sun dropped. Come December, we hang a float plane high on plastic fur. Let it dangle near angels, limbs of support. Dad loses his dad, returns to the crash site 3 decades later. All day on the sea to sky, picks shrapnel crews left from the forest floor, comes back, mows the yard while the sun drops, white sneakers gone green from lawn nights. 30 years, 1,000 stains, he won't get new ones. Swears by this pair. These souls fit fine. Thanks again, Aaron and Josh, for organizing everything, and to everybody involved for having me today.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was really, really wonderful. Yeah, thank you. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our next reader, Akshi Chadha. Akshi is a writer and literary editor. She is currently pursuing an MA in creative writing at the University of Toronto. In 2021, she graduated from the University of Western Ontario and was awarded the University of Western Ontario Gold Medal for being the top graduating student in the Honors English and Creative Writing program. She is the recipient of the 2021 Alfred Point Award in Poetry. Her works have been published in the Roadrunner Review, Watch Your Head, Alcacis Symposium, and Salve. As a writer, Akshi is interested in the immense potency of the written word for representation and advocacy. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Akshi Chadha.
Hello, everyone, and it's lovely to be here tonight. So I'm going to try my absolute best to not fumble through words that I myself wrote, but I often find that it is ultimately my own writing that betrays me. So here we go. Soothsaying, which is an ekphrastic poem based on René Magritte's painting Clairvoyance. Who came first, the egg or the birdie? Never mattered. Mutilations and engineered mutilations have skewed history. The new question is, who will go last? Feather-plucked, feather-loosening wings hang from a pulverizing frame. The vertebra doesn't shatter all at once. It displaces itself by the moment, before it finally disintegrates, without leaving a trace particle in the air. The lone eggshell conceals clairvoyance, viscous amnion waiting to pass down someone's throat, or to commence a doomed lineage, like the torchbearer at a game, trying to ignite a cauldron full of water. The child shrinking into itself and restructuring for survival, cracking through calcium, winged, waiting for the turn of the tide, the ancestral calling, the boot stomp on the trachea. The next poem's called Day 53, which is about the tangible and intangible alienation which occurs when you find yourself in an environment that's absolutely foreign to you. A violet morning erupts from a goose cry. Renegade drizzle splashes off the asphalt, leaves cold, wet kisses against my ankles. Hello, in another language. Maple leaves water sealed to the pavement. Sometime last night, glorious auburn bled to the edge, turned dirt brown. Nameless, royal blue blossoms barely cling to a wine-colored stem. The wind whistles alongside the bird with the chestnut torso, incanting foreign tunes. It stops and tilts its tiny head. I am too afraid to ask it to sing once more, to pick flowers like a tragedy seeker, unable to tell magnificence from poison, to climb a gray city bus and ride into another extraterrestrial dreamscape. The next poem's called Decreation, which is more on the nose climate change poem. You'll get a sense of fatality and pessimism in here, which says a lot about me as a person. Decreation. On the first day, we noticed the last of the bees had disappeared. The children of the new generation knew of bees from their mandatory end of days lessons, not by the sting on their palms on a windy day. On the second day, the waters were poisoned. It was elimination by acid, metal, sewage, and debit. On the third day, the soil cracked, the crevices deep enough to dump the dead. Near the plague pits, the preachers cried of divine retribution. On the fourth day, the seeds were frozen and preserved in metal pods. On the fifth day, the rich left in shuttles, all infrastructure dismantled. Fissured rock and asphalt, stomach consumed itself. On the sixth day, silence fell. No capacity to lift hardened tongues. Gasoline came free with prized bottled water, mercy killing and all. The stale clouds were grim reaping. The silver glint hummed soon. On the seventh day, we found the bees. This next poem's called Epitaph. I should have known when I was born. My palm lines were light and cut short. If I walked the beach, I walked the line. Cadavers and shards shore against my feet. I saw on the news, a white man brought a snowball in court. Admit into evidence our invincibility. We'll live. I've been chewing on plastic since. Too old for faith, too young to die. Fall smeared geisha on the sidewalk to Neverland. Each day, the red sun goes into the drying ocean, and I ask, will you come back for me? Is it funny or tragic? We will all end up sharing one tombstone. Here lies a monumental collection of fuck-ups. Ask me then, O neighboring bones, where have I been, and where did I really come from? So the last poem I'm going to read is called Tinderbox. We sat doused in gasoline, muck, and sunflowers. A petal, I want to wilt and imprint myself into an incombustible page, manufactured where the machines and manifestos are. I follow the sunflower faces westward, find light, afterglow of the little fires from back home, a difficult nation forged with sandalwood incense and battle. Home had history before they left rotting mango stone. Indus River gave first fodder, fluorescent world, unearthed and ousted, awaits returns. Soot-faced, I watch inevitable ignition, wispy embers by the time they brush me. Canaries drop to the ground, bury themselves. I look back. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for Josh and Aaron for having me here.
Thank you so much, Akshi. That was wonderful. I want to introduce our next reader, Ashley Lee. Ashley Lee is in her 4th year of an honors specialization in neuroscience with a minor in psychology. She's the co-founder of Spoken Word Society and has seen her writing published in Living Hyphen, Fresh Ink, and Symposium. Her work is primarily in prose poetry and short fiction, and she's drawn to narratives that capture a glimpse into everyday lives. Beyond her creative writing pursuits, Ashley is heavily involved with peer mentorship and student leadership on campus, as well as her volunteer work with the Canadian Mental Health Association. She's passionate about exploring the powerful benefits that creative writing can have for healing and mental wellness, and she is also Western's current student writer in residence. So please welcome Ashley Lee.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so humbled to be able to read with all of these amazingly talented writers tonight. So the first poem that I'd like to share with you all today is called In Gaps Between Teeth. And this is a prose poem that came from me just trying to process what exactly it means to be from a family that straddles 2 different cultures. I've never seen my father cry. He's done it before. Behind hospital doors and in the men's washrooms at funerals, his spine has curled concave until there is nothing left of him to shield a family with. But never in front of me. Why is it painful to imagine that our fathers were something before they were our fathers? If I ask, he might tell me that he comes from a country where the river is so clear you can drink it, where you never wake up before the sun does, a place where no one is sick yet, and farm boys like him still dream the world every night. If I ask, my mother might still remember what it's like to kiss a boy who held a song in the gaps between his teeth, fell in love with the way his red-tipped ears always betrayed him when he spoke to her. Might tell me that once my father biked 45 minutes just to hand her a rose in a plastic bag and then bolt. She kept the rose in a book, never told him that it had wilted on the way there. I never ask. Come home, he says. I wonder if it's too late, if I have lost my mother tongue in too many foreign men's mouths. He never thinks it a waste to pray for me to gods I don't bother to believe in. Never blames me for being worlds apart with my entitlement and rapid-fire English. When I'm asked where I am from, I do not stutter like he does. My father cannot go home. Home is a place between time, perpetually half memory. It is 2 ghost ships sailing anti-parallel, suspended between age and country. Home exists before the funeral. After the birth, it is laughing with all your teeth because there's no one to miss. What I mean to say is my father cannot go home, so he becomes home. How do we forgive ourselves for what our existence has stolen? I do not call. I come home, too late. My father is asleep in the armchair, upright, his phone still playing old Mandarin songs. I forget why I left in the first place. This second poem that I'd like to share is a poem in 4 parts, which explores the different ways that the pain associated with feeling unseen can manifest. And it's titled, Things Ghosts Do to Prove That They Are Still Here. 1. Acetone, toluene, methylene chloride, the hiss of aerosol, the only sound that feels like his own. The fumes will kill you, they say, if the cops don't. The fraying line between expression and crime is a color, a number. In school, his eyes trace low to the floor like they're holding something heavy. Chloride is yellow. He learns this in chemistry class, where a teacher with pin-straight hair and peroxide smile asks if he wants to be a doctor when he grows up. He is already grown. Yellow is his mother. It is her tired feet and daffodil sage tea and the fear in her eyes when she sees him scrubbing his hands in the sink. He sprays her thick across billboard advertisements and town murals, knows that if they want to scrub her off the city walls, they will have to take their art with her. 2. Some days the door is too far. Light peeks through the blackout curtain, yet she wakes to nothingness, which is not quite darkness, but not quite not darkness. Some days relief lies too close. Pain is an electroshock current that runs through her like she's water or air or something thinner than air, lights her up inside, and for a moment she can almost see herself again. She leaves an imprint of her form on the bed, the edges tangible. As the sheets bleed red around her, she is paint by numbers. Except there's only one number. She will try again tomorrow. A smile. She thinks about how fucking hard it will be to get the stains out. 3. At night, the lawn chairs in Briarwood Park rearrange. It's funny the way factory-issued plastic still stacks imperfectly. Paper collects in nonsensical piles. Smeared bagel receipts, soggy bits from love letters, crumpled grade school tests from the children down the street. Here, at least, there are no eviction notices. He sleeps, breath half icicle, dreams of a time when dreaming did not come at the cost of waking. Lone jogger stiffens at his snore, but eyes slide past him, through him, to the red-brown clay caked into the lifelines of his palms, a lifetime balanced on needlepoint. He wakes to puzzled glances. 2 symmetrical lawn chair stacks, pristine, colors jumbled. It can only be him who has done this. 4. Less is more. Sleeveless, backless, 3 top buttons of her shirtless, their pupils blown wide like they've never seen the light. Shivers as her sigh fans down the slope of their ears. Fingers trace every scar, every freckle, and asks for the story. This is all she has ever wanted. Thigh-high slips up her faux leather skirt. Climate change. Sliver of midriff above Daisy Dukes. Bipartisanship. Blowout curls and minx hair lashes toxic masculinity. Skin tight is her microphone. Without it, she is helium balloon sans latex cover. Finally, they see her. Finally, they are listening. I'd like to thank Dr. Schneider and Josh Lambier for hosting this event, as well as all of the WordsFest Planning Committee for just hosting such an amazing event that I'm so proud to be part of. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It was really wonderful reading. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next reader, Matthew Dawkins. Matthew is an undergraduate student studying English and writing with a double major in the Interdisciplinary School for the Advanced Studies in the Arts and Humanities program at Western University. Until We Break, Dawkins' debut novel, is set to be released in winter 2022. The story centers on issues with race, identity, and perseverance. So please welcome Matthew Dawkins.
Thank you for that introduction, Aaron. I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to be reading 2 poems for you and 1 piece of prose for my upcoming novel. Yeah, and I'm very excited to be here. So let's hop right into it. This first poem, when I was asked for I'm here, I knew that I kind of had to throw this in because I think it's very, not only is it recent, but I think it's very emblematic of how a lot of people my age are currently feeling. And that comes with having like an entire year online and moving into in-person classes specifically, and just like that shift, and it's kind of disorienting to say the least. But in that, I use this poem as kind of a tool to remember that whereas things are being replaced in this time, in that process of replacing and taking things out, that there's still things to be found and rediscovered. So this poem is called Buried Treasure. On garbage day, I threw out every last thing you gave to me, including the cake and the wine. I opened my phone and deleted all our photos together. I trashed the poetry, suffocated the succulents you set on my windowsill, threw the clothes you left behind in a large garbage bag and signed it free. Underneath all the things you left behind, I found the note I wrote to myself when I was 16. There were a few mixed metaphors and the rhyme wasn't full, but it was still beating. Even after all this time, he was still fighting to be found, and he was still fighting to be loved, and he was still fighting. The second poem I'm going to read is an exploration of me trying to make sense of the way we love things and often tend to hurt them just the same. This is called Skipping Rocks. By the lake, you taught me how to skip rocks. You told me to pick one up that is smooth, flat. You said, hold it, turn it to the side you prefer, and then I noticed that we pick rocks off the ground the way we pick oranges at the supermarket. We make sure she's perfect, take our time investigating her everywhere and everything, the whole time knowing full well that we will be using a kitchen knife on her tomorrow morning to crack her wide open, ground her for our use until she's dry and discolored. It is the same thing with the rocks. On my last try, I got 5 skips on the water. You were a great teacher, but the real lesson I learned on my own. We bring the rock into our arms only to throw it away. Not really hoping that it won't sink, but hoping it doesn't sink immediately. Not really hoping the rock will fly, but hoping it will dodge death just enough times to make a spectacle for us. And the third piece that I'll be reading is a short scene from my upcoming book, Until You Break. And I think it's relevant that I provide a little bit of context. So this is at the very beginning of the book, and it's essentially the scene that takes place after my main character, Naomi, who's a ballet dancer, comes home from a very extensive long day of rehearsing with her best friend, and she makes it home, and at home she basically uncovers some very deep trauma that will, I think, set the precedent for what needs to happen for the rest of the novel. The walk home wasn't too dark. There was still a bit of sunlight peeking out from the horizon between homes, and anyway, the girls had each other. Even if there were no lights in the sky or on the streets and it was pitch black the whole way, they were still two halves of something bright torn together. During their walk to Naomi's house, they were organizing their itinerary for their departure from Riverside and preparing for their future dancing in the New York City Ballet. They had decided that Jessica would dance both Swans in Swan Lake, and Naomi would be Giselle in Giselle every time they performed those ballets. But no matter who the lead was, they would promise to share each other's dressing rooms. Then they went on a tangent about sharing everything except tights. Jessica told Naomi that her dad would give her his car so she could pick Naomi up one summer evening, and the both of them would drive straight to New York together for their very first day. Road trip music was decided to be strictly pop, nothing slow. Windows would be down all the way, even at night. And whenever they got cold, they would use the blankets in the back seat. Wasn't it usually cold in New York? They would have to go shopping the next day, of course, for warmer attire when it inevitably snowed. These conversations always seemed so far and imaginary at first, but with each added detail, their hypothetical future began to feel more and more like a short present. Their imagination trailed off into silence by the time they arrived at the front door of Naomi's home. Naomi undid the laces of her sneakers on the front porch and stepped back inside with Jessica behind her. The house was silent, even though it was barely 7 in the evening, but on Fridays, Naomi knew her mother was in the living room. The girls made their way there together, and as expected, the entire space was askew with dental floss and shiny fabrics. Naomi's mother sat in the midst of it, oblivious and hard at work. Naomi cleared her throat over the noise of her mother muttering to herself. Rachel Morgan looked up at Naomi in the doorway. Oh, good, you're home. I'm done with these, but I think I might save those for Monday. How's that sound? Rachel Morgan pointed across the floor, covered with loose newspaper sheets, to a point freshly dyed, dark brown tights, then to a pair of untouched, light, flesh-colored tights. Naomi smiled. That's fine, Mom, thanks. Are you sure? Briefly, Naomi wondered what the girls' mothers who didn't have to repaint their daughters' tights do on a Friday evening. Watch television, maybe? Positive, she answered. How was ballet? Ija asked. Good, was Naomi's usual answer, despite whatever had happened that day. It came so naturally now, the lying. The first and only time Naomi had answered with something true, her mother had sat up with her all night to watch her practice the sugar plum variation from the Nutcracker in the standing mirror until it was perfect. Aja told her no matter what, they would get the variation right. She had spent too much money, too much time, too much effort for practice to be hopeless. Looking back, Naomi wasn't sure if they ever got to perfection, but she distinctly remembered the sound of her mother's miscounts at around 3 in the morning. Jessica nudged Naomi into her side. She gave Naomi a look and then nodded her head at Aja. Then it dawned on her. Naomi cleared her throat. Valentino said I have a shot at pre, I think. He did? Aja Morgan stood up and skipped over the askew fabrics on the floor. She embraced her daughter in a tight hug. Oh, you're going to do so well. Naomi nodded. This too was beginning to feel like more of a sure present. She continued, well, he said something like that. Aja Morgan squeezed harder. I'm so proud of you, Naomi. Then slowly she unraveled herself from her daughter and held her face. Aja searched her eyes. But you know, if you didn't do too well this year, I'd understand, right? Naomi blinked. What do you mean? Aja closed her mouth. She was thinking. Naomi could see the thoughts swirling in her eyes. Her mother said to her, losing a friend at this age can be hard. Naomi, you don't have to put any more pressure on yourself. The walls of their large living room began caving inward. Naomi Morgan must have pulled a lever or accidentally brushed against a hidden red button because her mother's hands clutching her face now felt like a trap. She felt the walls reverse in on her. Naomi looked to her right, to the spot where Jessica was just a moment ago, but there was no one there. She licked her lips, lying quickly. I'm fine. and the walls stopped moving. Aja embraced her again. I know, but if you ever need to talk, I'm here. Jessica would be so proud of you, Naomi. Slowly, Naomi placed her hands around her mother to seal the hug. Naomi waited for the walls to recede as well, but they did not move. Perhaps to remind her tomorrow of how close she had come to being crushed. Aja Morgan told Naomi that she was going to finish dyeing the last pair of tights and then finally make dinner. Naomi nodded, thanked her, and went up to her room alone. She locked the door behind her and dropped her bags to the ground. 2 weeks ago, after the funeral, Jessica had come back to help Naomi reorganize this space. The television was no longer on the wall because dancers didn't have time to watch movies. The carpet was rolled into a cylinder in the corner because how was she supposed to practice on a carpeted floor? Jessica even told her to bring the standing mirror from the living room in here so she could sit up with her every night and count her variations. Jessica never miscounted. Don't listen to her. I won't. You know I'm with you, right? I'll always be right here. Naomi looked up and there she was, really. Jessica was standing there in the corner of her bedroom, and where else would she be? They were supposed to dance in the New York City ballet together, drive there with the windows down, listening to pop music. None of that could happen if Jessica was dead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That was really wonderfully read. It is now my pleasure to introduce our final reader, Courtney Ward-Zbeetnoff. Courtney is currently pursuing her MFA in creative writing at the University of Victoria with a focus on creative nonfiction. She's a recent graduate of Western University, where she received her Honours Bachelor of Arts in English and Creative Writing. While at Western, she was the editor-in-chief of the Arts and Humanities publications Semicolon and Symposium, as well as the university's student writer-in-residence. Courtney was recently shortlisted for the 2020 National Bridge Prize in Fiction, and her poetry and prose have been published in local and international literary magazines. Please welcome Courtney Ward-Zbeetnoff.
Thank you so much for that intro, Erin, and thank you so much everyone for sharing your work already. I really love hearing what everybody brings and just being able to get together with some previous Western students that I've had classes with. So very exciting. The first piece I'm going to read for you, I have 3 here. The first is a short prose piece that I actually wrote for the WordsFest zine last year. So definitely put a plug in there, submit your work to the zine if you haven't already. And it's kind of interesting to look back at this piece now. It was like exactly a year ago, and it's very evident of kind of the headspace of kind of the first COVID winter, especially COVID winter in London, Ontario, in like a semi-windowless dark apartment. So it's called At Home Agoraphobia. I scuttle from duvet to drawer to pick a sock. There's one pair left, mismatched, wholly towed, with fabric that stretches translucent over my heel. When tugged up, a few strands rip past their breaking point. The rest of my socks are in the laundry bin, but I'll start repeating soon. The washer is too far, too loud, too cold, too much. Whenever I decide to wear socks next, I'll unfurl 2 from the hamper, brown bottomed, not from leather insoles, but grit of an unwashed floor. My stomach is cramping, a sharp pain is lodged in the bottom of my belly, and my head has become a heartbeat. I'm not sure when I fell asleep last night. I'm not sure when I've last had something to eat. I get myself to the kitchen and slump over the fridge door, swaying, knowing it can't support me like this, but I'm able to stay standing. I assess the options: an unsealed bag of baby carrots that are dried and gray, shriveled like slugs caught on hot pavement. A flaccid half cucumber, plastic wrapped. There's the open can of Summersby that I half drank a week ago, and it's definitely flat by now, and it's all glued to the sweet, sticky shadow of the last unfinished can I left there. There's a bottle of sriracha, its lid crusted like blood on a wound. I let my body rest on the door a little longer before nudging it closed with my hip. I eye a box of Oreos on the counter. Peeling back the plastic, I extract 3. I walk the cookies to the couch and curl into their comfort. Most days by 2 o'clock, I've changed the scenery in front of which I sit. Planted in the love seat between the lamp and shelf, the walls stare me down. Not tinted enough to be eggshell, but not quite white. Everything is off. My eyes flit from ceiling crease to carpet, and I am overcome with the unreasonable fear that someone will knock on the door. Everything is too much. Getting the groceries is too much, but at least that means the dishes can't be too much. I'd say Mondays are too much, but they're indistinguishable from Fridays and as meaningless as COVID June. The curtains are mostly closed, save a slit to peek through. Leaves rustle around the sky behind the panes, and I've forgotten what weather feels like and why leaves fall and what force keeps them moving towards something, and if all the energy behind their momentum is worth it if they have nowhere important to land. And the poem I will be reading first, I have two. The first one, it has a couple of titles. The short title is just Baba, so I will call it that for now. I've imagined it 1,000 times over. When she's cooking, silver hair spilling over the pot, pierogies swollen and water starch clouded, her cross swaying over the heat. Or when I'm driving her to the doctor's, when my gaze is excused by the road, when hesitation can be blamed on misdirections. And then we just keep driving in silence like we always do. Or when she's making halapchi, bare fingers pulling cabbage heads from boiling brine, rolling in motions I cannot mime. Or when she pushes a plate towards me, when I fill my mouth faster than I could spill the truth. She constantly mutters to herself, but speaks to me in trace phrases. Karusha? She asks. Yes, it's good. I tell her, da, you're blue. I always love what you've made me. I've imagined it 1,000 times over, but in these moments, my mouth cannot unearth a crypt. Soil catches in my teeth indigestible. Our conversations are jilted, our tongues generational, unable to bridge an ocean or a diaspora. I do not know how to ask if she will love me unconditionally. And I have one little final poem here. It's pretty short. It was a response to a prompt. The prompt was, what is the meaning of life? So it's just kind of a short little fun comment, I guess. And it's called Theories. Sometimes between sleeps, I think about how all the sky is connected and worry that I am a little bit too much of everyone I have ever loved. And for an atheist, I think about the afterlife a lot and if everything I've ever done adds up to much at all or even just enough. Sometimes between sleeps, I wonder what keeps us facing forward when everything we've ever learned stays behind us. And how to the sky, even the ocean seems to move nowhere but into itself. And that's the end of that one. So I will stop there for the reading right now. And then, yeah, I'm happy to, we're going to do a little Q&A. So I'll pass it back to Erin. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And thanks to all of the readers. That was really wonderful. We now have time for questions. If you have any kind of questions for the readers, could you drop them into the Q&A? Could I also ask the readers to facilitate this, unmute and turn their cameras on so that everyone can see you? Just to get us started, I'm going to ask a really simple question. This panel is titled Becoming a Writer, a Conversation for Aspiring Writers. So I just ask each one of you if you could just give one bit of advice, like one piece of advice to someone who's a few years behind you, to someone who's looking to be in the position that you're in. Just not the whole spiel, not this is everything that you need to do, but just one piece of advice you give them that you think will be useful to them in that kind of a position. So Akshi, I'm seeing you in my top left-hand corner. Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so one piece of advice would be to keep writing. A few years ago, when I was just in my first year, there were moments where I was like, oh, maybe I should stop doing this, because rejection is a part of being a writer, and it happens very often, more often than acceptances, of course, but keep writing. And what you are saying is something only you can say, and that is valuable. And I know there are a lot of writers, and you'll see all of these writers doing very well in life, and they're fantastic, but you're also one of them, or you're going to be. So just keep writing.
Right, Ashley.
I think for me, I would say as much as possible and as soon as possible, join anything that will put external pressure on you to continue writing, kind of following up on what Akshi was saying, like whether that's your writing courses if you're in a program that allows you to do that, or joining organizations, getting involved in things like Words Fest, forming communities and joining communities that will basically pressure you into continuing to write. Because I think a big part for me when I was starting out is, again, like Akshi was saying, facing rejection and just feeling like just perfectionism and just feeling like what you're putting out there isn't important. I think it's really important when you're starting out to have a community that tells you that that's not true, and also inspires you to keep going even when it gets hard.
Matthew.
Yeah, I think my one piece of advice would be to trust your gut. I feel like people have been writing for years and years and years, and especially now, I feel like our entertainment marketplace is so saturated with cliches and tropes, and I feel like it's easy to like compare ourselves and try to make ourselves unique. But I'd say as long as something resonates with you, it will definitely resonate with other people, and stay true to yourself, right? What hits the most to you, and that's what's most important. So yeah, trust your gut.
All right. Courtney.
Yeah, so I think to anyone who is an aspiring writer is to know that you're already a writer, I think is a really nice piece of advice. That it's not about, thanks for snaps, Matthew. It's not about the amount of publications, or if you have any, or the awards, or you have 18 novels or 25,000 novels, it's just about the act of writing. That's what makes you a writer. And things like being involved in your community, I found really helpful, events like this. So being here, everyone's already at a great start. And just continuing to read, and that your story and your words and your voice really do matter. So to keep writing.
All right, thanks. Andrew.
Yeah, I had a really different experience, I think, from some of the people who come to writing, in that I've never taken a creative writing seminar. I don't know what that, I know what it looks like, but I've never done one. So for me, what has really been helpful is recognizing that every writer I've spoken to, who I've said this question to, has also said, oh, well, I'm still an aspiring writer. Like, we're all still trying to be writers. The most helpful piece of advice I've ever received was when I met Shazia Hafiz Ramji for the first time. She signed her book for me. I told her I was trying to be a poet. She said, keep trying. The trying is all there is. And I keep that in mind a lot, because I think it's true. I mean, everybody's just trying their best. So whether you're going through a writing lull, whether you have that external pressure, whether you're involved in the community or not, trying to take your work to the next step is always valuable. I think it's important to stay mindful of that, and just understand where you're at yourself as a writer.
Thank you. So we've got a question from Professor David Barrick. Some of you may know and or remember him. What strategies or activities have helped you continue writing after you graduated? Because I know at least one of you is not yet graduated, or when you're not taking a creative writing class, or when you get stuck in a project. So basically, what do you do to keep going after the external pressure, for example, taking creative writing classes is gone, or when you've reached a bit of an impasse? Ashley, can you start us off?
I think this is especially like a thing that I think about a lot, because I am not able to, because of my program, take a lot of creative writing courses and be involved in a lot of structured things like that. I think for me, what really helps is even like when you're, even if like you have writer's block, you can't write. I think sometimes just sitting down and thinking about why your piece is important, the piece that you're trying to write, or the story that you're trying to tell, thinking about just verbalizing it, writing it down, telling it to someone else, like, why does this matter, and what do I want to do with this story? And I think having that purpose in your mind is really important for driving you to continue to work on it and continue to overcome all those obstacles without external deadlines and things like that.
Thanks. Courtney.
Yeah, so when I'm kind of feeling stuck on a project or in writing in general, I kind of like going back to my roots, I guess, of loving the craft of writing, and that is reading. Like, I think a lot of us started out as voracious readers before we started writing. And so if I feel like I can't physically produce any work or I'm stuck on a project, then I'll go back to the books that I loved and I'll reread them, and that will usually get me back into the kind of space. And things like getting out into the world, I'm also very inspired by what's around me and like people in my life and things that I experience. So kind of having experiences, and it's okay to take a break from a project and then return to it when you feel clear-headed.
Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, kind of. I think Ashley answered the question so beautifully as well, and she kind of took a lot of the words out of my mouth. As it comes to like internal, I guess motivations, and I think that's what I've learned as a writer. And so for me, it's really come down to knowing that I can't rely on inspiration or external motivation anymore, and that I just have to keep going. And I think like just one small practice that I've taken and just ran with is knowing that 90% of writing anyways is editing. So it doesn't matter if your first draft is the worst, as long as you're sitting down and you're getting thoughts out. Even if it's terrible diction, it makes no sense. As long as like, getting the process going and you're just putting thoughts into a page, that can always be edited. And sometimes that's how you find small little gems as well. So.
Akshi.
Yeah, just reiterating what everyone else has said. Reading is very important. Like, I mainly write poetry, and so I am surrounded by like 5 or 5 poetry books at a time. And I'll just randomly pick them up. I don't read them in order ever, which is bad, and you shouldn't do that. But yeah, I'll just like pick up a random I'll just like open a random page and read it. And sometimes I'm inspired and sometimes I'm not, but it's just like loving the craft at the end of the day and just being surrounded by words. And sometimes it does ignite and then you want to write. So yeah, just reading.
Andrew.
Yeah, I think I'm really fortunate in a way to be writing poetry in this sense, because I don't rely on poetry as like a way to make a living. It's something that I do all the time and I really enjoy, but it's not something that I have to do all the time. And that's something I'm kind of coming to terms with lately, is that, you know, taking months off, weeks off, days off, time off from writing is actually really valuable as a writer. Coming back fresh and coming back with a new perspective to an old manuscript or coming back to an old poem or whatever can actually be really valuable. And so it's so much easier said than done, but taking that pressure away from yourself, giving yourself time to breathe and be away from your work means that when you come back, you're going to be so much more fresh. And that's something that I've been trying to teach myself and work with over the past few months. I'd hate to position myself as an expert on it, but I think it's something that has a lot more value than a lot of people think. So I'm all for taking a break if you need a break.
Great. This is a question for everyone, but I think, Courtney, for obvious reasons, once you hear the question, I think you should start with answering it. How has the pandemic affected your craft? Was sitting with yourself helpful or paralyzing for your writing life or process? And you read that piece from the zine and I saw this question and I was like, I think this question, we should start with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, good question. That is kind of the hot question, right? And I think so of course, so much burnout is happening from the last year and a half. I am personally burnt out, very exhausted. And that does come into the creative side of things too. And yeah, I think especially in the beginning, you know, people on Twitter and social media were like, well, what are you working on? We're all at home. Are you feeling how many loaves of bread have you baked today? Like, how many novels have you written? And I'm like, I'm still like trying to come to terms with what is happening across the world. I'm not quite being so productive right now. So it definitely has affected my craft. And I think as writers, we have to take care of ourselves and people around us. So it's just kind of important to understand that everybody's a person first, and like writing can bring us so much joy, but we kind of have to take care of ourselves first, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah. Instead of just doing the rounds, I think I just open it up. Does anyone else want to chime in? No one? All right, in that case, I've got another question for you. And again, here, instead of doing the rounds, I'll just see if anyone wants to answer it. Can you suggest some publishers who are more willing to work with aspiring writers than established writers? Courtney, you just answered one. So Andrew, and then Courtney, if you want to follow, does that work for everyone?
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I haven't had a chance to work with a long list of publishers. I would say the natural progression, it seems to be, is going through journals and then going through the next step up from that, whatever that may be. Kind of depends on what style of writing you're doing and what genre. But journals are always a great place to start. And one beautiful thing about journals is that there's so many damn journals out there. It's hard not to find one that will probably jive with your work. And I understand that there's a tendency, and I had the same thing for like my whole undergrad. I was like, how on earth do I get published? I need to get published. I need to put poems in journals. That's what has to happen. And so I would look for like, what's an easy journal to get into? Unfortunately, doesn't exactly exist like that, from what I understand, because even the easy ones would reject me pretty quickly right away. So I think really what you want to look for is journals that fit with the themes and ideas that you're working with, that will jive kind of with what you're working towards. And that's probably where you'll find a little more success, is kind of looking for, you know, places where work that's already been published reflects what you're striving towards.
Courtney?
Yeah, I was definitely going to echo the literary magazine route. That's where a lot of my, well, slash all of my publications, I don't have any full-length collections yet. They're all kind of pieces in literary magazines. And a great place to start if you're a student at Western on campus is there's a lot of on-campus publications. I was the editor-in-chief of Semicolon and Symposium. We have a previous editor-in-chief of Snaps here, which is like a slam poetry publication. There's Iconoclast. There's a lot of places to get published as a student. And yeah, if you're a community member, literally Googling like literary magazine emerging writers Canada, tons of things will come up. I found a great resource is actually Twitter. I made a Twitter account like whatever, a couple years ago, and there's great calls for submissions from kind of new indie lit mags in Canada that love pieces from emerging writers. So that's a great resource that I found out about.
Anyone else want to take a shot at that question? No? All right. I have one more question. It's a question for everyone, so do the same thing. If you think you've got something to offer, just pop your hand up and answer. Do you have any tips for creating vivid imagery? What inspires your images? Ashley?
I think for me, what has really helped, especially because I'm personally someone who really loves imagery, is learning to be more present in my daily life and being more in touch with the things that I find beautiful and my emotions. I think sometimes the best imagery, as we saw with a lot of poems and pieces today, is things in our everyday life that inspires emotion and it inspires connections. And I think being receptive to that when you're not writing is really helpful, like looking for those connections and looking for those things, those little things that move you, and just being really present with your environment. And then when those things do come up, writing it down or making note of it as something that you can expand on or include in your writing has been really helpful for me.
It's great advice. Anyone else? No one? In that case, I'll ask the audience whether they've got any more questions, because I think we've asked all of them. I'll just wait a little bit. I'm not seeing anything else coming up. So I'd like to thank a number of people. I'd like to thank Josh for organizing this. I'd like to thank Writing Studies for sponsoring this panel. I'd like to thank all of the audience members for coming. I took a quick look at the participants list and I recognized a variety of names from across the country, and it was just very cool to see some of you, well, all of you in attendance. And I'd finally like to thank all of our panelists, Ashley, Andrew, Courtney, Matthew, Akshi, for some great answers, some really great reading. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And one final thank you to everyone who attended. Really, thank you so much for coming. So well done, everyone.